Wading into War, Chapter 15. The offices of the Houston Post-Dispatch were located on Fannin in Texas. The 22-story building was the largest in downtown when it was built in 1926. Its neoclassicism ran counter to the Art Deco style that emerged in the 1920s. To complete the look, molded gargoyles looked down from the top edge. Behind the building, the parking lot was illuminated by 4 arc lamps, their conical glow dimly keeping out the darkness. In this late spring night, the humidity could almost be seen wafting under the light. I had played the only card I possessed, splitting up that trio of devils. I knew Gardner's work habits pretty well. When he was on a hot story, he didn't always work in his apartment. He had a pretty small cubby in the main newsroom with a table and a typewriter. At home, he had a slightly larger workspace where he banged out all those pulp yarns he tried to get published with only moderate success. I'd also known him to write news copy at home and then take the finished piece to the newspaper. But on bigger stories, he liked to go to the office and spread out his work. He took his typewriter and confiscated a break room table. It was an idiosyncrasy that some of his fellow reporters looked down on, but it got Gardner's work noticed. He was thorough. That was what both impressed me about his work and worried for his safety now. I was hoping the sensitivity of his information would compel Gardner to head to the office. If not, then I had just signed his death warrant. Gardner had his car, but he also liked to take the bus. It got him in touch with the people, he always told me. He found stories no one cared about to write. I often wondered if he ever thought people might not want to read those types of stories. If so, it never seemed to bother him. With a story this big, however, Gardner was bound to drive. Dietrich and I had stationed ourselves across the street from the back corner of the office building. We were in a small alley that gave us a clear view of the entire parking lot. It would be easy to spot Gardner's car and then catch him before he entered the building. Dietrich said, "I hope you know your friend well enough, Mr. Wade. I'd hate to think you were trying to stall me, or worse, lead me astray, and allow Mr. Gardner to publish those lies." I nodded. The thought had occurred to me, but there's a part of me that just wants to see you behind bars, and the best way to do that is to make sure you find your way there. Dietrich chuckled softly. You may not believe me, but I'm American, and I do love the American bravado, even in the face of certain defeat. I chewed my lower lip. We'll see. Off to the east, we heard the sound of a car approaching fast. I didn't think it was Gardner. His apartment was west of the newsroom. But as a Lincoln Zephyr turned into view, I realized it was him. He must have gone a roundabout way, thinking he might be followed. Smart man. I only hoped he had left his apartment before the goons showed up. Let's go. I started walking into the parking lot. Dietrich fell in line behind me. Remember, I still have your gun. I smirked, even though he couldn't see my face. How could I forget? Gardner had parked nearer to the building than I would have expected. I had to half-run to catch up with him. I slipped my hands into my pocket. "Gordon!" I said, loud enough to get his attention, but soft enough to avoid notice. At this time of night, the traffic was steady, but not full. "Wade?" Gardner turned to face me. He clutched a slim leather briefcase. "What are you doing here?" He thought for a moment, then said, "No way. There's no way you're stopping me. This is too big." He pointed at the building. "I'm going in there and publishing this." I shook my head. That's not a good idea. Dietrich had just walked into the light. "This man wants those documents. I think you better give it to him." With infinite slowness, the right hand that I had slipped into my pocket while running slid out of my pocket. In it, I held my trump card. Gardner looked behind me and his eyes widened. Dietrich, his face shadowed by his fedora, merely smiled. "I've read your work, Mr. Gardner. Very passionate. I'm almost tempted to see how you would write the story. You have read the information, I take it?" The ire in Gardner's voice started shining through. "You damn right I read it. Enough to know that the Nazis are murderers. When we win this war, they're going to pay." "Mr. Gardner," Dietrich said, "the United States isn't even in this war. And if they join, they will lose, just like everyone else. I said, tell that to the Soviets. Dietrich laughed. Even if they stop the Fuhrer, they won't be able to do anything. They're as good as defeated. He indicated the briefcase with my gun. Now, the case. Gardner didn't move. Dietrich said, since you know what's in those documents, I'm not sure I can let you live. You might still write a story. You will have no proof, of course, but you could rouse some anger over here. He cocked the gun, the click, a sharp sound in the night. Gardner, anger clearly flashing in his eyes, tensed. I saw it. From the corner of my eyes, I could tell Dietrich saw it too. We were all tense, but none of us moved. Then, things began to happen all at once.